Everyone, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to actually set up a studio for a studio build. And we're just kind of starting off with a room which is 5 by 8 by 3 meters tall. I personally, I think that this size space is probably fairly good for most kind of people. Obviously, more is generally better in most situations, especially in a world where social distancing is a thing. But we're just going to start off with this space here. So the first thing that we normally say to people when they're looking at building a studio is that you need some type of background. That can either be the wall that you're dealing with or a background system like a triple hook system or something like that that falls from the ceiling. If you're doing photography, then white is usually a pretty good choice regarding background. But then if you wanted to do kind of green screen, adding the additional green backgrounds means that you can be doing other stuff as well. So I'm just going to have those two there, and I can just quickly switch them off when I'm working on it. So the next step is to look at lighting. So generally speaking, most people need to be lit by at least 2 lights. So if we go over here to our permalights, let's just pick up an ARRI light source as our main light source. You can kind of see a single light source here. One of the interesting things about a room this size is that we can bounce light off surfaces, and that will create a certain amount of fill, but it is fairly aggressive. So if we have a look at, Mike's face here, we can there we go. You can kind of see that he is fairly contrasty. The type of light that's hitting his face is fairly contrasty. So then what we normally do is we introduce a second light source. So if we introduce a second one of exactly the same light source, you end up with that really kind of flat look. So we'll get Mike to kind of face the camera for us. Thanks, Mike. Let's just turn a little bit. That was a bit creepy. But you can kind of see Mike there. But that's a very flat-esque type of look. For females, this is not normally an issue, but for men, generally speaking, we like to incorporate a little bit more contrast. So we normally take this second fill light and we'll pull that down slightly. You're probably a bit too far, probably a bit more like that. So this will create shape. If we start having the light come down at the subject, you'll get a bit more shadow underneath that chin, which will kind of help emphasize the jawline without making it kind of too much. If you went too high up, that light becomes fairly aggressive from the top down, and then we can kind of bring that down. You can kind of see where that shadow kind of starts to come in. Because these light panels are quite large, you'll see that they do produce a very kind of soft kind of illumination. So if I just click on solo, you can see on the nose there, let me just switch over to something a bit more closer so I can just show you his nose a bit more. You can kind of see just how much shadow and everything there is about that light. If that light source was a more traditional light source, it's probably a bit big. Let's get something a bit smaller. There we go. If more traditional kind of light source, you can see that shadow line is now super aggressive. So the great thing about panels is that panels generally are large. And so the larger the light source is, the more it behaves as if it was a softbox the size of the light source. There are lights that we have these days which are significantly bigger, like you can get like DMG Lumiere lights, which are more of a strip kind of thing, and this creates more of a wrap, so you can kind of see just how much that's wrapping around the nose there comparatively to the last one. And they're beautiful lights to work with in regards to the softness of the light that is produced. And we can just kind of put this one back on. Turn off solo. There we go. And you can just see that kind of shadowing and that beautiful kind of shading across there. If this background was a black background, one of the things you'd notice straight away is that his black hair is going to start to get lost in that. Whereas normally what we would do there is add a third light source. So this again is very basic kind of photographic-esque kind of setup. With that being said, I might just go over to my photographic equipment just so I can grab a light source that imitates that. So here we go. So what this light is doing, and let me just switch that off, there is this light source is helping create those highlights. So if we turn that off now, you kind of see on the hair, which really helps separate him from the subject. Okay, So this is normally how you would do a piece to camera. So if we were doing, for instance, if this was a video shoot and Mike here is doing a presentation for a group, this is how we would probably light him. If we turn off this, let's go back to our white background. One of the things you'll notice straight away is that the white background isn't quite white. The reason for this is that the light that is hitting the subject is further away from the background than it is the subject. So if the subject is properly exposed, it means that the background will be underexposed. This is a fairly predictable fall off, and normally to accommodate this, we just add more lights for the background. So there's a couple of ways to do this. If this was a proper kind of studio build, we'd have that as 5 meters wide. And what we would do is we would start introducing lights. Sorry, let me grab that. Lights specifically for the background. So we have that there. Lift this up out of the way. Turn that off. Duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. And now we can start to light that background. The importance for this is that when you light a background, it means you don't have to worry about it when you're lighting the subject. Whereas if this, for instance, if we didn't have lights in the background, what would happen is when we go like this, you'll see that background's gone that kind of gray color. And you might want that, don't get me wrong, it's definitely one of the more appealing tonal grays. But if you want that high key kind of white background, and the reason that you might have a high key white background is you might want, for instance, to be doing picture in picture. And so you can have, let me just turn off this light stand. You can see here now we've got that empty space on the side there where Mike could be doing a PowerPoint presentation, could be talking about changes in the market. He could be doing all sorts of things. He's a white collar kind of guy, so he could be having specs and all that kind of stuff up here, which is quite handy. If you wanted to as well, if this was a green background, you could be doing chroma key stuff where you're removing the background completely and again having that picture-in-picture type of look. So again, fairly basic kind of setup. What tends to happen a lot of the builds lately is that these lights here that are in front of Mike, lighting up Mike, also need to be ceiling mounted. And the reason for this is that we're dealing with companies that don't want to have any floor stands, they don't want to have any of that type of stuff. And so these get mounted to the ceiling, which increases their overall height and then increases that level of shadow. To counteract this, you can move the lights further away and more to the side, which changes the angle at which they hit the subject. So as they get closer, the angle gets more aggressive, and as they get further away, the angle becomes less aggressive. And so that allows you to lift up the light source to counteract that. Because we've lit the background in regards to this green screen, the green is a lot flatter than it would be normally. But again, finding a balance between those things is fairly important. And so that's just a basic ceiling mounted setup for lighting Mike. You could also incorporate additional light sources. This is a fairly fixed setup where Mike is the individual being lit by this snoot, as well as being lit by the two front lights. But let's just say you were doing an interview. If you were doing an interview where you've got two people kind of together, let's get a second helper. It's models. Here we go. Let's get Neil. Let's get you. Yeah, it's fine. Some facial hair. Get you in a pose. Yep. Say we were recording both these people together. Let's make sure Mike isn't always. Then what you'd find is you'd have to kind of start incorporating additional lights, since they can create shadows and cross kind of lighting. So we'd add a third light right in the center there. I'll drop this down a little bit to kind of help light both of them more evenly from the front. In regards to camera positions, we would start incorporating additional kind of cameras. So you might have a camera here and a camera here. And we'll just put there. And so if we switch to these cameras now, you can see Mike in close-up. There we go. And we'll just do the other one. And over here. So one of the things you'll notice kind of straight away is that we've got two close-up cameras, one for each subject, and then one in the middle, which is giving us that kind of wide shot. But with these shots here, what's happening is we're getting this white wall in because the background's only 5 meters wide. The only way to get around that is to kind of bring that a little bit more centered, but then you lose some of that kind of that look. So if we kind of bring that around here, and now we switch this one, you'll see it's that thing there. The other option is, and this is what tends to be happening a lot more lately, is that we'll go for a full cyc. So a full cyc is basically just a green cyclorama. This doesn't have that issue of so if we go back to that camera there, so now we can kind of bring that around and you can start to get that lighting. One of the things you did notice as we kind of come more further, wrong one, as we kind of bring this further around, you'll see that there's a little bit of shine. There's very little you can do to obviously to affect that. We can start manipulating the lights that are ceiling mounted a bit more in order to get that kind of a bit more even. But now you can have the appearance of a much larger studio without it actually being a large studio. And you could do the same on the opposite side. You could have the same kind of curve. So let's just duplicate this, rotate it, and let's go 90. Put that in the position. Bring it off the wall a bit. There we go. Bring that up. So now we can get those more aggressive angles and still maintain that green background. So again, this is the quick basic showing of how that lighting and that setup would kind of occur. Again, it's not something that you need to really worry about if you're getting us to build your studio, because we'll walk you through this entire process and make sure that you are aware of how this all works and how we can go about changing that. So it's definitely one of those things that we like to kind of explain to people, because then it kind of makes it more real for them. They kind of have a look at it and they see how it all works. Both these people would be mic'd up. You could have them on chairs, or they could be standing around the table. So all these things are definitely possible in regards to studio builds. So it's just one of those things that if you are interested in building a studio, we're kind of here to help you through that process. Let's just move back here. There. So again, this could be a podcast. What happened to your eyes? Let's just switch this one. Now let's get you to look at that one as well. Boom. Oh, that's interesting. They both look at the camera. So it's just one of those things. So again, when you're looking at building a studio, there's lots of things you can do to change the look and feel of a space. But most of the time, this is a fairly basic setup that we tend to stick to in order to get you the best results out of the box. And then if we wanted to do green screen and stuff like that, we can change the backgrounds, make it look like they're in an office or something along those lines, as well as giving them the ability to shoot with 3 cameras. So if you're interested in building a studio and are looking to kind of change the way that you do in-house video production, you can always contact Dragon Image. We're always happy to help, and we can always create a studio to suit your needs specifically. Thanks.
So